Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, we had a little extra time as we delayed the start of this recording. Not surprising. Those of you who know us.
I was going to say, can we really say we delayed it when this was probably always when it was going to start? But anyway,
But yes. I did squeeze in some putting away Halloween, bittersweet, putting away Halloween decorations. It has been 2 weeks, but, and the season's still been scary, but decided they'd been up there long enough.
And we were just discussing that, maybe next year you can buy like a Santa Claus hat for Jack Skellington and just leave them up through January, maybe even.
You can leave it through January, and I don't know, the Easter Bunny makes an appearance, and
that's true. They have doors for every holiday, so you can probably just give them a new hat each year round. That would be pretty funny if you just left them out there all the time.
It'd be great is to get little mock-ups of those trees and surround them with
that would be good. That'd be
the
a
tree
lot
doors.
Of work, But anyway, we're already getting off topic. Today we are here to preview the Packers.
What is this podcast about again?
We are here to preview the Packers' upcoming Week 11 matchup against the Chicago Bears. We're going to be talking all about, what's looking good for the Packers in this matchup, what's looking bad for the Packers in this matchup. We're going to be talking about, players to watch for, what we hope the Packers do in terms of approach to this game. But before we get to any of that, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you heard here, please subscribe, whether that's, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Please leave a review. Please leave a comment. We would really appreciate it. We love interacting with everyone from the Packers verse. And then follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes, news reports for the Packers, injury reports, content from other Packers content creators that we enjoy. One-stop shop and everything Titletown, so please check us out there. Please subscribe. Please leave a review. We'd really appreciate it. But Dad, before we get into actually talking about this game, we do have at least one piece of news, and that is the Packers have opened Marshawn Lloyd's return window this week, and he is back practicing. Although he is now listed with simultaneously the ankle injury that had kept him out on IR for a while, and now he's also listed with a hamstring injury, which is a bit surprising and also a bit weird because then Matt LaFleur said in a press conference that it's actually not a hamstring injury, but they got scans and it should be fine and he should still be good to go for practice. But that's our news update there is that Marshawn Lloyd is back practicing.
Yeah, LaFleur's clarification did not clarify anything.
No, it made it way more confusing. I'm like, okay, so why are you listing it as a hamstring if it's not a hamstring? Like, what? Yeah. Can't just list the injury? But anyway, so it's going to be good to see Lloyd back. Now, it sounds like he's not going to be ready to play for this game, I would imagine, although we will see. They have opened his practice window, so they have another, 17 days. They have 21 days from when they open it to, officially activate him off IR. I am curious what his role is going to be, Dad, when he is back. Is he the running back 2 somehow suddenly? They talked about how much his speed is really impactful in terms of generating explosive plays, but they seem to really like Wilson and Brooks right now. So I don't know if he's the running back 4. Are they going to keep 4 running backs?
And I think even LaFleur said that we never kept 4 running backs. There is an open roster spot. Yep. You'd have to make another move.
There was some contemplation as to whether or not that would go to Jonathan Ford with Colby Wooden missing some time this week.
Right. So we haven't heard anything about that. And they could also just elevate Ford.
Yeah, for a day. Yeah, since he's on the practice squad.
For the week, because I don't know if he's been elevated at all yet this year. Has he? Maybe once?
Yeah, I think... No, because he was on IR already so long, so he wouldn't have been elevated yet.
He started on IR.
Yeah, and so those are really the main updates. I just don't know exactly where you would he would fit in terms of, they seem to really like Wilson. They seem to really like, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But anyway, let's move on, though, Dad, to actually talking about this game. We'll talk about Lloyd later and see how much he contributes. But let's start off with the injury report. Always unfortunate that we have to start with that. We have the injury report as of Thursday, so we haven't seen the Friday stuff yet. But we do at least have some intel on who has been practicing and who has not been practicing. For the Packers, though, we're just going to focus on, the DNPs and new additions. Although it is important to note, Jordan Love is still on the injury report with that groin injury he suffered a few weeks ago, but he has been a full participant both days. So that is at least some good news there. In terms of people not practicing, the only player who was not practicing was Colby Wooden this past week. He's been kind of on again, off again on the injury report. He's dealing with a shoulder injury that he sustained, I think, in the last game. So that's something, keep an eye on going forward. But it seems like they're probably not going to have him this week. He's the only DNP, though, although we did get 2 new additions to the injury report on Thursday who were not on the injury report Wednesday, which is never ideal when you're getting midweek additions there. And those are Jordan Morgan and Rasheed Walker with a shoulder and knee, respectively. They were not on the injury report Wednesday, but they were both limited on Thursday. Dad, any thoughts on the Packers side of the injury report?
So the one thing I'm wondering about with the Morgan and Walker are whether these are kind of old injuries that then gave them the day off for on Thursday.
They didn't give them the full day off. They were limited. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, well, we know that Morgan has been dealing with that shoulder injury off and on again since like the offseason. And then I think Walker has been listed previously with a knee injury, although someone might need to fact check me on that one. I think he has previously been like limited with that before. So hopefully it's just, a bit of maintenance and nothing new popping up. But those are the big ones on the Packers side. Moving over to the Bears side of things, though, they have a few players listed. The first update there, though, is Jaquan Brisker, one of their starting safeties, was put on IR this past few days. He's been dealing with a concussion since October 7th, which is super scary. Hopefully everything is okay with him, and after this IR stint, he can, get back to getting on the field. And then beyond that, they have a couple players not practicing. Tevin Jenkins, who is their starting left guard, has not been practicing. And then Kiran Amagaji also was not practicing. He's one of their backup tackles. It is, though, looking like they're going to have both their starting tackles back, Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright. They both were not able to play last week, so that's going to be big for them to have, 2 of their starting 5 offensive linemen back in the fold.
Yeah, and to do a quick fact-checking on the injuries, that Walker was listed with a knee for the pregame report for the Lions game. I don't know if it's the same knee. So it could be, and Morgan has been listed with that shoulder multiple times. So my hope, at least, is that this is just sort of a maintenance rest day for those pre-existing injuries.
Yeah, definitely.
And not that anything new has flared up or been aggravated.
Fingers crossed for sure. But that's the injury report. Both teams, a couple missing players, but both teams, it seems like, getting healthier than they were a few weeks ago. Let's move on, though, Dad, to the game preview. Starting off with this game, it's going to be in Chicago at noon Central Time with the forecast, cloudy skies, high of 59 degrees. So not super cold, but not warm either.
Basic football weather.
Yeah.
Green Bay's football weather.
Favored by 5.5 points, over under of 40.5 with an implied score of 23-18 Packers. Dad, take us away with, what's been going on with Chicago, though. What have they been up to? How's the season looking for them? It's been a bit tumultuous for them, but, they are still 4-5.
Yeah, it's been a busy last few weeks. After they almost had a chance to get to what would have been 5-2 with that Hail Mary against Washington. And since then, it's gone kind of south. So far south, in fact, that they just fired their offensive coordinator this past week, Shane Waldron, and the passing game coordinator, Thomas Brown, was promoted to the OC. Ever since losing that game to Washington on that Hail Mary, they've lost the last two games, making 3 straight losses, averaging 6 points against the Cardinals and Patriots after the game with no touchdowns.
Yeah, they haven't scored a touchdown in 23 straight offensive possessions, which is that's not a number you want to see if you're an offense.
Yeah, so they've really kind of, I don't know if it was just this was coming down the track anyway, or they've really started.
Yeah, it's not surprising. It's not surprising that they decided to move on from Waldron. It just hasn't. No. It hasn't been working for the offense, and you can see that in these offensive numbers too.
Yeah, I think also, if you want my personal opinion on that, some of that is pay no attention to the man behind the curtain firing. It's like it's either you or me, buddy. Yeah, sorry, I hate to let you go, but if I don't do something soon, it's I'm next. Sometimes and Eberflus might be next anyway.
Yeah, sometimes these coordinator firings are, the lever that the head coach pulls to be like, okay, I need to make a change here, and I need to take some heat off of myself. But at the same time, the offense has not been good, though, right?
It has not, especially lately. So if we talk about how they are for the season, now on offense, and how they haven't been great late for the season, they are 24th in points per drive on the season on offense, 27th in yards per drive. You compare that to the Packers, who are 12th in points per drive and 8th in yards per drive on offense. Defense, however, is a different story. They are 6th in points per drive on defense and 6th in yards per drive on defense. Green Bay is 10th in points per drive and 13th in yards per drive, which actually, for our standards, I'm
Take it. I'll take
it.
I'll take an average defense.
And they have the 14th best starting field position on defense and the 10th best starting field position on offense. So they're,
solid.
Kind of middle of the pack in where they're getting the ball, which is sort of a sum total of, offense, defense, and special teams, really.
Mm-hmm.
By DVOA, they are 12th on defense. Green Bay is 13th. They're 6th against the pass, but only 30th against the run on defense.
They've struggled against run. We'll talk about that later. You're stealing all my points for later, I hope you know.
Well,
anyway,
there's not much.
Continue, please.
Well, they are 30th by DVOA on offense. Green Bay is 5th on offense. Green Bay is overall 13th on defense. And by special teams, they are 9th, and Green Bay, by the way, is 26th.
Yeah, that's what happens when the kicking game is a total mess for the majority of the year. You're gonna be pretty low in the special teams rankings. But Dad, so Chicago, stronger defense than offense so far this year. That's definitely reflected in those numbers. But let's start moving into our general thoughts on how this game is looking. And we'll start off with our favorite section, Hey Now Play Nice, where we just say, some nice things about the opponent. We butter them up, What are some things, though, Dad, that the Bears are doing well so far this year?
So their pass defense has been pretty good. The Bears lead the league, giving up the lowest EPA per dropback, according to both RBSDM and NFL Pro. They also give up the 7th lowest dropback success rate. And if you look at the breakdown on PFF, the coverage is their best graded aspect of their defense, which is 5th. Their coverage being 5th best in the league. Among qualifying cornerbacks with at least 100 coverage snaps, Jalen Johnson is 2nd in the league in passer rating against at only 46.8. They will be missing Brisker at safety, who has the 16th lowest passer rating against amongst safeties. But Kevin Byard has not been bad. He's got the 10th best coverage grade by PFF amongst safeties, though his passer rating against is 33rd out of 92 safeties. And Tyreek Stevenson is tied for 4th amongst all defensive backs with 7 pass breakups. So as long as he's
actually paying attention to the
play on the field.
Their secondary is really good. I mean, you haven't even mentioned Kyler Gordon is one of the better slot players in the entire NFL. He's missed a few games, and you can tell how good their defense is with and without him. They're substantially better when he's on the field. But their whole secondary is extremely talented, specifically their 3 corners. Yeah,
so that's one of maybe the strongest part of their team. Look, if you break it down about between all of the different phases of the game, that might be their strongest group.
Yeah, I think for sure. For me, though, the thing that I wanted to highlight for the Bears is it hasn't gone amazing so far this year, but they do really have a fantastic array of pass catchers. They've struggled a bit, but DJ Moore has 4 1,000-yard seasons in his first 6 years. And then you got Keenan Allen, who's a 6-time Pro Bowler. And then you got Rome Odunze, who was the 9th overall pick this past year. They're currently spending the 3rd most amount of money on receivers in the league in terms of cap space per spot track. And that's with Rome Odunze on his rookie deal. So they've invested a lot in those pass catcher positions, and they're all super talented players. And that's not even counting the fact that they have, Cole Kmet on top of that, who's the 8th highest paid tight end in the league. And, when they've targeted him, Cole Kmet's been great. He's 3rd amongst tight ends in the league in EPA per target, and he's 17th in the league amongst all pass catchers in EPA per target. So he's probably not getting used as much as he should be, but it just highlights the fact that, they have those 3 receivers, and then they also have Cole Kmet. They got a lot of weapons in this offense, and a lot of established weapons.
Yeah, because Kmet's had some really big years for them, like getting a lot of touchdowns. I don't know if he's racked up a lot of yards, but he's put up some big games.
Yeah, I think his highest yard total is 760, but for a tight end, that's quite good. And they just gave him a big contract either this past year or a couple years ago. I can't remember. But yeah, so they have a wide array of, weapons that the Packers are going to have to deal with that I think, might create some mismatches one-on-one. But Dad, that does, bring us over to our next section, which is what are we nervous about? Specifically things, that the Bears do well that we think the Packers might struggle with. What's your first take in this one?
So my first one is something that dovetails into what you were saying about their strengths is Green Bay's coverage against tight ends and also running backs. By DVOA from FTN Fantasy, Green Bay is 17th in the league at covering running backs as pass catchers and 28th in covering tight ends. So adjusted for strength of opponent. And as you mentioned, Kmet has been very efficient by EPA per target. Swift is not necessarily at the top of the league, but is definitely capable. He's currently 10th in the league amongst running backs with 230 receiving yards and has averaged about 25 yards per game this season and similar to his career. So he's a capable, though not top of the line pass catcher, but maybe
Yeah,
the worry is they don't have to be.
He's not the type of running back who's going to kill you, like splitting out of the backfield and like running routes and stuff like that. That's not really his strength. His strength is in the screen game and like getting dump offs and then creating in space. He's super dynamic when he gets the ball in space. He's not like one of those running backs like McCaffrey or Aaron Jones who's like an elite route runner, but getting the ball in space, that's his bread and butter.
Yeah, and so those are just things that the Bears have available to them on offense that could exploit weaknesses on the Packers.
I can definitely see that. Our linebackers
try to spam them.
Our linebackers have not covered well this year at all. But
except for one.
That's true. Except for Edgerrin Cooper. He's our saving grace. I hope to see him more this week. For me, the thing that I may be a little bit nervous about is, the Bears possibly having a very different offense stylistically with a new offensive coordinator. We talked about it already this past Tuesday. The Bears fired their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, because of the offensive struggles. And, whenever a team changes play callers, it always, makes preparing for them a bit trickier because all the film you've been studying, all the tendencies you've been watching for, I mean, it's almost maybe all out the window, or it's not. You never actually know how much it's going to change. But just some numbers here. We talked about they promoted passing game coordinator Thomas Brown. He's a very young coach, and he does not have a lot of experience calling plays. But last year, he did call plays for the Panthers from week 8 to week 10. So all of these numbers, just the caveat that it's a very small sample size. It's only 3 games, and it was with Bryce Young, who really struggled last year. But under Thomas Brown, the Panthers were not much better than the Bears have been so far this year. They were 25th in EPA per dropback and 31st in EPA per carry over those 3 weeks. So slightly better passing the ball and slightly worse running the ball. The part that's interesting, though, is I think we could see a big difference in the pass heaviness of the offense. Under Waldron this year, the Bears have been 20th in neutral pass rate per RBSDM at just 50.2%. But in those 3 games under Thomas Brown, the Panthers were 4th in the league in neutral pass rate at 64.2%. So a massive swing in just the pass heaviness of the offense. And that's neutral pass rate. So that takes out, chasing leads in garbage time, trying to come back in the fourth quarter. It just seems like we could be, going into a situation where the offense for the Bears is way different than maybe what they had been preparing for over the bye week. And so that maybe I could see that causing some issues early for the Packers where it's like, okay, we don't know what they're going to do right here. It's like, we're kind of prepared for a bit of a, ground and pound and then playing off of that. But it seems like, maybe they might, go the entirely different direction from that, and with Thomas Brown as the OC now.
Yeah, and will they get a bump? Sometimes when teams shake things up, there's this bump.
Yeah, and it's like it's definitely a thing for head coaches. I mean, we just saw last week the Saints beat the Falcons, after they fired Dennis Allen. Do you get a mini one for firing a coordinator? I mean, it's certainly possible, and they definitely, Waldron was not doing an amazing job there, so they might, have an upgrade there with Brown. So I guess we will see. But that's the thing that I'm nervous about is, them just being a little bit harder to prepare for and maybe having more tricks up their sleeve with an offensive coordinator that the Packers have not had, 2 weeks to prepare for.
Right. And there's not much tape out there on what his tendencies are as an OC.
Exactly. Yeah. Anything else that you're maybe nervous about, Ted?
The other thing I'm worried about is Chicago blitzing. Though they don't do it very much, their blitz rate is not particularly high. They're 19th in the league. But when they do blitz, they have the 5th lowest EPA per dropback against in the league. So they don't blitz much, but when they do, it's effective. And according to NFL Pro, this year, when blitzed, Love is 35th out of 35 in EPA per dropback.
Yeah.
And and when not blitzed, Love is second best EPA per dropback in the league. I'll talk more about that later, but that's this year.
And last year he was really good against the blitz. I'm not really that worried about it. I think a lot of it is coming down to, okay, that Rams play and that Lions play were both very, high leverage.
I was trying to find success rate, as a different metric for that doesn't get skewed so much by a couple of really, really, really horrible plays. Because 2 pick sixes is going to really tank your EPA per play.
And, I think he's also the most blitz quarterback in the league, although he might have, come down a little bit. It was like 2 weeks ago I looked it up, and he was by far, the most blitzed quarterback in the entire league. I will say, though, if we're looking at just, how they look in terms of a success rate thing, I think the closest that I could look at to that is yards per attempt, where Jordan Love does also rank 33rd against the blitz. So it's not just the turnovers. They have not been good enough against the blitz so far this year. And I'm hoping that's something that they come out of the bye week and have an answer for there, because I think they really need to figure that out, because I think teams are going to keep doing it. And if you can't beat it, that's just a really tough spot to be in. But Dad, those are the things that we're nervous about. But, the Packers, like we talked about earlier, they're favored in this game, so they have some advantages too. Let's talk a little bit about some exploitable weaknesses for the Bears. What are some things that you see where the Packers can maybe take advantage?
Okay, so the first thing I'll talk about is Caleb Williams holds on to the ball and makes mistakes. He has the 8th longest time to throw, according to PFF. He has the second worst, so 33rd in the league, amongst qualifying QBs on target throw percentage, and has the second worst bad throw percentage in the league, only ahead of Bryce Young in that, according to Pro Football Reference. He also leads the league in total poor throws on the season, according to Fantasy Pros. And then he's making these mistakes without making teams pay the price as much. He's only 24th in the league in air yards per completion and 27th in air yards per attempt, completed air yards per attempt. So Love, in contrast, also is not that high in the on-target throw percentage, but he is making up for that in part by being 4th in completed air yards per completion and 8th in air yards per attempt. So you're getting some boom bust with Love, but not so much of the boom with Williams so far. And this latest stretch has probably brought those numbers down significantly, I would think.
You wonder, how much changes with the new coordinator. Obviously, we already talked about, their tackles didn't play the last game. They've been a little bit banged up front. So I guess we'll see how much of that, carries over into this game. For me, the thing that I wanted to highlight, though, that the Bears have not been doing well and I think is somewhere the Packers can attack is the Bears' run defense really has not been very good this year, surprisingly. We talked about how good their pass defense is. We talked about how good their coverage has been. But they're right now 21st in EPA per carry, 15th in success rate, and 28th in stuff rate. They're kind of letting you move the ball. They're letting you hit big plays. They're not hitting you in the backfield. And they haven't even been playing, very strong running opponents. But we already talked about by DVOA, which takes into account, strength of schedule. They're 30th in run defense. And they've really been letting that happen. And, they just lost Andrew Billings, their nose tackle, to a chest injury. So it sounds like is not going to be available in this game. And so that's another big, run stuffer up the middle where I think their run defense might get even worse with him out.
Yeah. And I looked a little bit at the run defense too. So a little thing to add. They're actually, their run defense outside the tackles is also weak.
Yeah.
They give up the 5th highest EPA per rush outside the tackles and the 3rd highest rushing yards over expected per attempt outside the tackles, according to NFL Pro.
And they're allowing a lot of yards after contact there as well. They're not making the tackles in space too.
5th most yards after contact per attempt outside the tackles.
Nice. I'm glad you had that. Look at us. Locked in. But yeah, no, I think they should be able to run outside in this one for sure. Like I mentioned with Billings out, I think they should be able to run inside more than the numbers say for Chicago because he was a big part of their run defense, taking on double teams there in the middle. So I think the Packers should be able to run the ball pretty consistently in this game, you'd hope, and you'd hope they would just at least stick with the run. Although, actually, I was looking at this, and I was saying, the Packers need to run the ball more. They need to run the ball more. And I was looking, and I was like, their neutral pass rate is super low this year. And I even went and looked at just weeks 7 to 9, so not the Malik Willis games, because I was like, this has to be the Malik Willis games.
50 carry game.
Well, that's the thing. It's with those games in, they're dead last in neutral pass rate, very, very dead last, if I remember correctly. But even in the 7 to 9 game, they're 20 something in neutral pass rate. They're sticking with the run pretty well, which I like to see because I like when the Packers are a run first team and then try to play off of that. But Dad, that does kind of take us into, what we hope the Packers do in this one. And how do you hope the Packers approach this game?
So I'm kind of leaning into what I think is a weakness. So I'd like to see them blitz and use a lot of simulated pressure to confuse the Bears O-line and frustrate Williams. Chicago is 5th worst in the league on offense against the blitz by EPA per dropback. And Williams is the most sacked quarterback in the league right now with 38. He's also the 3rd worst in the league at avoiding sacks. He gives up the 3rd highest pressure to sack conversion rate on the season, according to PFF. So I would like to see them not necessarily, send, a lot of extra rushers on every play, but to disguise who is actually coming.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we talked about over the bye week check-in, where it was the Packers, when they blitz, are getting a ton of pressure, but they're actually not getting home enough. And because they're not getting home enough, their pressure rate is crazy when they're blitzing, but their sack rate is pretty low. And because of that, their actual defense with blitzing is worse by EPA per play than it is without blitzing, despite the fact that they're unable to get pressure without blitzing. So it's actually a weird little thing. like you mentioned, I'm also like looking for them to do some more simulated, some twists and stunts. The Bears' offensive line has really struggled whenever any team is running games up front. Obviously, that does leave you susceptible a little bit to, run game stuff where, guys are leaving gaps and twisting and stunting, and then you can just have a running back run straight to where the guy is vacating. But I do think that they need to try and confuse the offensive line as much as they can in this one.
Yeah, and potentially Caleb Williams as well.
Yep.
As a rookie.
For me, the thing I hope that the Packers do, and this isn't even necessarily just this game, I think this is a post-bye thing that I hope they change up. I just want to see Josh Jacobs on the field on third down more. In terms of conversion rate, Green Bay is currently 19th in the NFL on offense in third down conversion rate, just 37.4%. And so overall on the season, they've faced 124 third downs. Jacobs has been on the field for only 69 of those, which is 56%. Wilson has been on the field for 42, which is 34%, and then Chris Brooks has been on the field on 9, but 7 of those have been in the last 2 games. So Jacobs only on the field on 56% of third downs. You might be like, oh, how many of those are like third and longs? Maybe they're just not having running backs on the field as much. Well, even on 3rd and 6 or less, Jacobs has only been on the field for 62% of those. And I just think he's clearly one of your 3 best offensive skill position players. He should be closer to like 80% on those critical downs. I mean, they're not converting third downs well enough right now. They need their best players on the field, and I get that Chris Brooks is probably a better pass protector than Jacobs, but he's not nearly the dynamic weapon that Jacobs is, and I think you just need the threat of the run there is important. I think he's a better pass catcher out of the backfield than either Brooks or Wilson, and he's just, more dynamic with the ball. So I want to see him on the field on third down way more often. I don't think 62% on 3rd and 6 or less is just, it's not nearly enough. I mean, those are plays where you can run the ball. And it's just not enough Jacobs on those critical downs, I think, right now.
Yeah, and you want to have the threat there of him running, and you want to have your best players on the field for the most important downs.
Exactly.
It's like, why have your backups on the critical downs?
Yeah, I have no problem with, Jacobs only playing, 60, 65% of snaps overall. Like, I have no problem with that. That's good. That's, saving him for the course of the season. But let's have him on the field on these critical downs, especially because we're not a very good third down offense right now. And so that's the thing that I wanted to highlight, and that what I hope they do. Like I mentioned, I hope they use also lots of twists and stunts on defense. But Dad, anything else that you hope the Packers do, or do you want to move on to telling us about the guy that you want to not take your eye off?
Yeah, we can move on to don't take your eye off that guy.
Okay, who you got?
And so, as we were talking about, Josh Jacobs, he's going to be the player I'm going to be watching this game to see how the measure of how the Packers are doing. In addition to the Bears struggling against the run on defense, Jacobs is 4th in the league in rushing yards with 762 yards at 4.8 yards per carry. He's also 7th in rush yards over expected per attempt for the season, and 7th in yards after contact per attempt. He also has the 5th most explosive runs, so runs over 10 yards. I didn't get the number down. I think it's like 20.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing really well.
Yeah, and he's been one of their best players in offense, and I think this could be a one, especially when, as you mentioned, their interior rush defense just got worse. So it would be really nice if they can't defend the run anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's how you have to start this game, is just being like, okay, we're going to make you stop the run first. We're going to see if you can do it. Because like we talked about, and if you can't, there's just no reason to throw the ball. Just run it down their throats, bleed the clock, and just, hold the ball. But yeah, so that's a very good one. I definitely thought about picking Jacobs because the run game, I think, could be so important in this one. For me, though, I picked Lucas Van Ness, and these aren't necessarily players who we think are going to have a massive game. These are also players who we think, we're just watching because we need them to have a good game, or their play will decide how the game is going to go. For me, though, I'm picking Lucas Van Ness because I'm guessing he's the new starting edge rusher opposite Rashawn Gary. This is going to be the first game without Preston Smith for Green Bay. So how does he handle a heavier snap load, I would imagine? They really need him to, kind of step it up here because he's had a bit of a, disappointing second season, I would say, so far for a, first overall pick. Sorry, not first overall pick, for a first round pick, 12th overall. Would be the lottery if it was the NBA. But the fact of the matter is he hasn't really lived up to that billing yet. And the Packers, for a team that has struggled to rush the passer, could really use him taking a step in this second half of the year. And I'm just curious to see what that looks like with him, taking on a bigger role.
Yeah, presumably he's going to be getting a lot of snaps, I would think, now. And, Preston ate up a lot of snaps. Not only is like the first game now without him, we only had one game without him the whole time he was here.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I mean, he's such an Iron Man. It's truly a testament to, his career. He's had a fantastic career. And I think they're going to miss him a little bit, but that's going to be him and Vanessa and Eningbari are going to have to really step up. And then we're going to see which one of Cox or Mosby it's going to be. I'm interested to see. But that does kind of move us on to our next bit. Although, was there any other player that you were looking at in this one? There was one that I was keeping an eye on also, but they were my secondary one. Was there anyone else that you wanted to highlight?
Well, I was thinking about adding somebody from the secondary, like McKinney, especially if Williams is going to throw, or Evan Williams, if Caleb Williams is going to throw some balls up for grab. But also, when you're watching on the regular broadcast and not the All-22, it's hard to keep an eye on what the safeties are doing.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, it's like the other player that I was going to, talk about, I thought briefly about talking about Emmanuel Wilson or Chris Brooks, like one of the secondary running backs, because they are getting a lot of snaps and the run game is going to be important in this one. I also thought about picking Kenny. I think that their interior offensive line is much weaker than their tackles. And so that could be a place where, the Packers could take some advantage. And we do know, historically at least, Kenny usually gets going around December. He does have a habit of starting the season slow
December Kenny,
and then picking it up. I'm hoping that that's the case and that he's able to pick it up here because I think also had a bit of a down season. I mean, everyone along that D-line has. But so that's another one that I'm keeping an eye on for that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
For a similar reason, I was also considering Devontae Wyatt.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. I think you could pick any of the D-line guys and just be like, hey, we need a big game from y'all, please.
We've got our eye on you.
Exactly. Yeah, please. But that does take us over to our overtime. These are things where it's just like, hey, we didn't get a chance to talk about this yet. What are some things that you wanted to touch on that didn't fit in any of our neat little buckets?
So the one thing that I think is really going to be interesting is what is Love's mobility going to be like?
Yeah.
Will we see an increased usage under center or play action or other aspects of the play design and calling? So from week 4 on, so after Love came back as a starter after the injury, he's only played 19% under center. Last year, they ran 28% of their plays under center. Mm-hmm. After the injury this year, they've only run play action 20% of the time compared to 26% of the time play action last year. And also, as he mentioned above, in terms of how he's affected by the blitz, this year he's last in EPA per dropback. Last year, he was third best, if you include the regular season playoffs, in EPA per dropback, and his passer rating when facing the blitz was 102.6, and compared to this year's 54.7. Mm-hmm. And his touchdown to interception ratio was 13-1 against the blitz, and this year it's 4-5.
It's hard to beat the blitz if you can't move, and I think that's what teams are doing right now.
So I'm hoping that he's had more time to recover and rest, and that his mobility will be better, and they'll go back to the kind of game plan that they would prefer to have, and that he will be able to, turn and move and take a few steps to avoid blitzers.
Yeah, and we can talk all about, getting the run game going. We can talk all about trying to fix the pass rush. We can talk all about moving Edgerrin Cooper to the starting lineup. We can talk all about, playing Evan Williams more, moving Carrington Valentine over Eric Stokes. None of this is going to matter if Jordan Love can't get healthy and, get back to, playing at a high level. I mean, he's been playing pretty well, but I think it's been clear that he's been hampered by some of these injuries. And if he can't get healthy, I mean, none of this matters. So I think that is number one most important thing is for him to, get back to feeling good. And it's been good that he's been a full participant in each of the practices this week. That's at least a good sign. But you hope that this doesn't linger any longer. This doesn't keep him from being mobile, like you mentioned. Because, I mean, if he's not able to play at close to 100%, it's going to be really hard for Green Bay to get where they want to go.
Yeah. And, so this year he's been a little bit more middle of the pack than we were hoping for, kind of in between the beginning of last year and the end of last year, in terms of his play in a lot of metrics. And so, and I think we can chalk some of that up to him playing with a little bit reduced mobility.
Yeah. And a lot of those are, based on turnovers. Cause I feel like when he hasn't turned the ball over, outside of turnover worthy plays, he's been good. He's been pretty money so far. There've been a couple missed throws here and there, but that just is what it is. And I think if he can just cut out some of those turnovers, I think we could really see the second half of last year Jordan Love back in the second half of this year, hopefully. And I mean, I think a lot of that does, start and end with how healthy he is and how much he's able to move and protect himself. For me, the thing that I wanted to talk about is what post-buy changes do we see for Green Bay? Usually a team will take a bye week to kind of do some self-scouting, do some self-reflecting, and be like, hey, this player needs to play more, this player needs to play less, we need to do more of this, et cetera, et cetera. So some things I'm keeping my eye out for. Who is edge for? It could be Brenton Cox. It could be Aaron Mosby. Mosby was the one getting the snaps as the edge 5 a few weeks ago. But just this past week, Hafley said he's really, really excited for Brenton Cox and went out of his way to mention that. So there's that. Who's going to be that edge 4 guy? I think if I had to guess right now, it would be Mosby. But based on that quote, it sounds like they're high on Cox as well. So we're going to see. Because that edge 4 spot has been getting like a lot of snaps. That's not like a nothing position. Like there's a good rotation there. The other thing is, does Edgerrin Cooper get a heavier snap load coming out of the bye? He played 2/3 of snaps against the Lions per PFF 2 weeks ago, rather. So is he going to maybe transition to being a even more full-time player? That's something to keep an eye on. Does Valentine pass Stokes? That's something I want to see. I would hope that Valentine gets more opportunities than Stokes going forward, just because he's been the better player so far this year. So that's something I'm watching. And then do we see any changes to how receivers are deployed? I mean, we talked about it in the bye week check-in. The mistakes that have been being made on offense in terms of drops have been really critical to Green Bay's success, especially in the red zone. And, we talked about how, Wicks has been kind of a 3-3B. Does he need to move to more of a 4? He's been, getting a lot of targets, but not having a lot of completions. And he's second on the team in drops. And the completion percentage when targeted is only like 39%, which is by far the worst on the team. I just wonder if they're going to change, snap count percentages, deployments, targets, how that distribution works out. I think that's another thing I'm keeping my eye on for. But yeah, I just usually coming out of a bye, you see a lot of changes for a team. I'm just curious if the Packers change anything. Is there anything I missed there, though, Dad, that coming out of the bye you maybe want to see?
One thing I thought was curious is this whole idea of who is going to be edge 4, Cox versus Mosby. And Mosby wasn't always an edge rusher.
Yeah.
And so we joked about it in our kind of bye week check-in. It's like, who's going to be filling that drop into coverage from the edge Preston Smith role if you want to disguise who's rushing it and have simulated pressure? You got to have somebody drop in coverage. And from that perspective, Mosby seems like
he was a safety. I think
he started as a safety and then has gradually moved closer and closer to the ball.
I don't remember who it was, but someone was joking on a podcast. It's like, in 2 years he's going to put on another 50 pounds, be a nose tackle. Like he's just slowly but surely packing on weight and moving closer and closer to the ball. But I think that's a really important one. Oh, the other one I forgot to mention is, do you think the right guard rotation continues coming out of the bye? I mean, is it still going to be Ryan and Morgan 50-50 split, or do you think that they're going to go away from that? I don't know.
That's a very good question. I don't know if I have an answer. If I had to make a guess, if I had to put one down, I'm going to say yes, they're going to keep doing it.
Probably. I think it's just for the development of Morgan, they're probably going to keep doing it. Ryan's been pretty good this year. He has had a couple of games where it's been bad, but for the most part, he's been pretty solid this year, which, he'll take an average right guard overall. So I hope to keep seeing that rotation with Morgan, though I think that it'd be important for his development. You don't want your first round pick to just not be playing. I mean, that's never ideal. Anything else in the overtime, though, Dad, that you wanted to touch on? I mean, we got a lot to talk about. It's a pretty big game for Green Bay. They need to start making up some ground here in the NFC.
Yes, you don't want to drop another NFC North game.
Yeah, you can't go 0-3 in the division. I mean, that's so well. I mean, not that you can't go 0-3 in the division, but you really don't want to go 0-3 in the division.
If you want to get where you want to get to,
you can't do that. Exactly.
So that in some ways it's a big game for the Packers.
I would say in a lot of ways it's the big game for the Packers. I mean, they haven't won a division game yet, and their conference record is not very good either. This is going to be important for a lot of tiebreakers winning these conference games going forward.
Yeah.
Yep. Moving on, though, Dad, let's kind of start wrapping things up. Bottom line, the Bears win if blank.
For me, I have if they get to an early lead, however, whether that's sort of mistakes by the Packers or whoever, and then they just lean on the run and the Bears can't stop it. It may not be what the new OC's tendencies are, but if they get the chance to just lean on the run and the Packers, have this, even this year where they've been better overall against the run, they've still had times where they in game, they couldn't get the stop where they needed to.
Yeah. And they've just let teams churn out, obviously the Joe Mixon Houston game comes to mind. Saquon Barkley in week 1, Jonathan Taylor with the Colts before they mysteriously benched him in the fourth quarter. Thank you again, Indy. We appreciate that. But
Jahmyr Gibbs, I think in the fourth
fourth quarter. Yeah. But yeah, those. They've had some struggles with running backs at times, even though the run defense has certainly been better than it was last year. For me, I have the Bears win if Green Bay can't get pressure on defense and then they make mistakes on offense, which, they've done a lot this year. That might be the the summary of a lot of Packers games so far this year. It's
so you're saying if the Packers stop doing what they've been doing all season,
or if the Packers keep doing what they've been doing all season,
yes. The opponent wins, yes.
The
opponent wins. The Packers keep doing what they've been doing all season.
Yeah, it's been a problem for Green Bay. They've made a lot of mistakes on offense. We talked about it during the bye week check-in. They're up there in terms of penalties per game on offense. They're up there in terms of pre-snap penalties per game on offense. They're up there in drops. They're up there in just all kinds of different mistakes, fumbles, fumble and snaps. They've beaten themselves several different times, and they need to, coming out of the bye, be a little bit more buttoned up there. And I think that's something where that could ultimately lead to them struggling in this game if they struggle to do that. And then conversely on defense, if they're not able to get after the quarterback and they're just letting Caleb Williams sit back there and hold the ball all game. I think those are two really important things for Green Bay in this one. But Dad, let's flip it over. Packers win if blank.
So for me, I have it that said they can stay on schedule on offense and keep rushing plays available on third down. According to NFL Pro, Chicago is 10th best defense by EPA per play on third down and long, but is the 5th worst defense against in third down and short by EPA per play. Mm-hmm. And then the Bears also give up the 9th highest success rate on third down and rushing plays, but only the 2nd lowest success rate on third down and passing plays. Mm-hmm. So I think you want to stay on schedule and have a run play available on third down. It makes a big difference if you have to pass or you can run the ball against them on third.
Yeah, I have something similar. The Packers win if they can run the ball efficiently and limit mistakes. That means, not getting a holding penalty on 1st and 2nd down. Suddenly you're in 3rd and 12 and you have to pass. I think if they can just stay ahead of the sticks and just keep running the ball and not have penalties, not have negative plays, and just hold the ball, bleed the clock, play time of possession, I think that's a way the Packers could really lean on the Bears in this one and, really come out of this with a win if they can just get that run game going and keep that run game going throughout the game. But Dad, that kind of does it for us. Score prediction. What do you got?
So I going to say that I think the Bears are still really not all that good so far this year, and I have the Packers winning 28-14.
Okay, I have the Packers winning 24-13. I do think the Bears break their streak of back-to-back games with no touchdowns scored. I think they do get one in this one with a new offensive coordinator, maybe giving them some new looks. But I do think that the Packers should be able to run the ball. They should be able to score some points, assuming that they can get their heads out of their you-know-whats in the red zone, because that's another big thing. That was another thing that I thought about talking about in the bottom line. It's like if the Packers just can't convert in the red zone and are forced to, either go for it on 4th or kick field goals, that would obviously be a way that they could, lose this game. But I have the Packers winning in this one. I think that the Packers should be able to run the ball, should be able to hopefully, cause some confusion for the Bears offensive line in terms of the simulators they're throwing at them. And we'll see. But Dad, wrapping things up here, any last thoughts that you want to have for this game, or should we transition out of here?
I hope it's going to be a fun, easy game.
Hopefully. But anyway, thank you everyone so much for listening. This has been our preview for the Packers Week 11 matchup against the Bears. Packers going into this one could really use a division win, could really use a conference win. This is a big game for Green Bay. Coming out of the bye as well, coming down the home stretch. Hopefully they can clean up some of the mistakes they had in the first half of the year out of this bye week. I think that's going to be big for them going forward. Hopefully Jordan Love can look a little healthier coming out of this bye week. But anyway, we will be here previewing every single game the rest of the way, breaking down every single game the rest of the way, pre-games and post-games, 2 episodes a week, every single week. So check out that post-game. After this game, we'll be talking all about, what went well in this game, what went wrong in this game, who played well, who didn't play well. So go ahead and check that out when it's out next week. Thank you again for listening. Please subscribe, whether that's Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all 3. We would really appreciate it. Leave a review, leave a comment. Please follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker for updates on new episodes, roster moves, injury reports, content from other Packers content creators. The Packers content space is just so awesome. So check that out. And thank you again for listening. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.